Welcome to another edition of Preps Plus Extra, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel's online high school sports show, where we'll talk about obviously high school sports, and we won't talk about replacement referees this week.
It's a good thing.
Yes. Hi, I'm Mark Stewart, prep editor of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Joining me as always, J.R. Radcliffe, sports editor of Now Newspapers. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, we got a little clarity after the last batch of football games. You know, we're past the halfway point, and I think we kind of know now which teams are going to charge towards those conference titles, and we can kind of see which teams are going to be in the playoffs and which teams have work to do.
Right. One of those teams that's charging toward the playoffs is Pewaukee. Pewaukee had a big victory over Wauwatosa West last week in a battle of unbeatens. Let's hear what Ryan Stepanovich, one of Pewaukee's football players, had to say about the victory.
This is a huge win. They were undefeated. They're only two. We beat Greendale last week, which is a huge win. But this week was really big. They were flying high. And, you know, this isn't a downgrade on Wauwatosa West, but I feel like it was kind of like this is the first time they've been undefeated throughout like half the season. And they're flying high. And I don't know if they know how to deal with a dogfight like us where we're going 4 quarters and it's tough to endure.
Coach said you're still undefeated, but some things to work on going forward here?
For sure. We got to get better, and that's our motto almost every week. We got to keep getting better because at the end of the season, we have to be at our top. We have to peak at the end of the season. We can't peak at week 4 or week 5. It's got to be getting better every week. We do good, but there's some things that we can improve on, and that's always every week. So.
Speaking of Pewaukee, Pewaukee has a first-year football coach in Justin Frisky. Obviously, he's done a great job there, but he's not the only one. Who are some of the other guys that you've seen this year, first-year coaches who really stepped in and made a difference in their programs?
Well, we've talked a little bit in the past about McGuanago's Clay Iverson. He's really built that program back to prominence. They're totally on track for a playoff berth. You know, one of the more interesting ones is Whitnall's Jeff Wauwatosa. He came from Milwaukee, Hamilton, and actually when he was talking to our reporters before the year, he talked about how he was going to instill more of a run, probably a running approach, stronger defense, whereas in the past Whitnall's been kind of a high-scoring pass-first situation. You know, but through the first few games, and Whitnall's had a lot of success. They're 4-1. They've been passing the football. They got a quarterback in Zach Sutton who kind of fits the system that they had run in the past, and he's got a stable of receivers that he's working with, and they're piling up the wins. And right now they've got a big battle coming up this weekend with Brown Deer. They can really take control of the Woodland East Division, and they're definitely cruising towards a playoff spot under Jeff Wauwatosa. He really opened eyes early with that win over Eisenhower in one of the first weeks there to sort of get the ball rolling.
Right. You know, one guy, Jeff Wauwatosa came from the city conference. One guy that kind of sticks out to me is Theo Carney, the former Wisconsin Badger over at Washington. He was, I guess maybe it's a technicality if you call him a first-year head coach because he was a co-coach there for the last couple years. But anytime you kind of take the reins by yourself, you're able to kind of put your stamp on things. Washington's 4-1 right now. They have one of the better sophomores in the area in quarterback Amaru King, who's a real exciting option type player who they're kind of developing into, hoping that will develop into a passer. And hey, right now they're 4-0. So I guess those are two teams among others. We don't want to slight anybody. We know there's others out there, but those are two of the first-year guys that have kind of jumped out at us. Switching gears here, big major upset in the area last week. Definitely. Sussex Hamilton lost to Menominee Falls, and as someone who does the area rankings for the Journal Sentinel, I started off with Arrowhead #1, and
they're still there.
And they're still there, and then I wonder, okay, now. Who's number 2? I mean, there are a handful of teams out there that could have a legitimate claim to being, number 2, be it, Brookfield East, which is undefeated in the Greater Metro, Oak Creek, which is undefeated in the Southeast, and let's not forget Wisconsin Lutheran, which is undefeated in the Little 10 and coming off a state finals appearance. And our friends the North Shore Homestead still undefeated.
And that's actually where I was headed with that Homestead. They, they're not a very exciting choice because they're always up there along with Arrowhead, but Homestead, they're just doing their thing, plowing along, winning North Shore Conference games. They still have the teeth of their schedule coming up, so we're really going to learn a lot about Homestead over the next few weeks here before we get into the playoffs. But Coach Dave Keel always has one of the top teams in the area, and this year's no different. Brookfield East, I think at the beginning of the year we still saw that Sussex Hamilton team, especially after the first couple outcomes, as probably the team to beat in the Greater Metro. But after last week, they dismantled Brookfield Central. They've already, they're undefeated to this point in the season. They've already beaten Wauwatosa West. They got a great running back in Zach Schober, a short but very effective quarterback who's a very good dual threat in Zach D'Amico. And right now, I think you probably could say Brookfield East is the number 2 team in the area, if not Homestead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I went the route with Brookfield East just because of their schedule. I mean, they've beaten a lot of quality teams. You mentioned Wauwatosa West, and they've really gotten through, except for Sussex Hamilton. They've gotten through, the bulk of their or the teeth of their Greater Metro Conference schedule. So I did go that route, and I guess I followed with Wisconsin Lutheran, and
I saw them last week. They're amazing. They're really a good football team, and they're definitely back to the level of the team that won. Or made it to the state championship game several years in a row.
Right. And real quick before we change gears, Oak Creek, we can't forget about them since Oak Creek beat Menominee Falls, which just beat the former number 2 team in the area, Sussex Hamilton. So this is going to be interesting to see how things shake out in the playoffs. And, for those of you who complain about the rankings, hey, it'll all be settled on the field. It'll all work itself out eventually. So one thing that we won't be worked out, presumably, we're going to switch gears. We'll normally talk about high school stuff here. If you're a pro football fan, obviously, unless you've been under a rock, you know what happened in the Packers game, and it got us kind of thinking about at the high school level what some of the worst officiating moments, I guess we would call it, from a high school perspective. JR, what came to mind for you?
Yeah, in basketball, a few years ago, Greendale was playing New Berlin West. The West team had Jason Avercamp on it, who later went on to play for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, a great post player. And I remember there were about 4 seconds left in the game. Greendale had a chance to, or I should say West had a chance to win with some free throws and missed down the stretch. Greendale threw up a desperation three-quarter court shot. It didn't go in, but the guy was whistled for traveling with 3 seconds left. So they're down 2 points at this point. West is inbounding, and one of the Greendale players, Kyle Johnson, who's a really slick multi-sport athlete, he drew a foul on Avercamp. He kind of got the referee to bite on a call there. And they ended up turning the ball over right from out of bounds. The ball wasn't even inbounded. Gave them a chance to send it into Johnson, who hit a game-winning three-pointer at the buzzer. But it was just crazy because they took a desperation heave and they'd given up on the game and they called traveling, and that sort of allowed for these other things to set into motion. It was just a crazy game to begin with, and some strange officiating, but mostly just a crazy finish to a game.
Yeah, I guess basketball. My thoughts came to basketball too. One just popped in my head. Germantown a couple years ago.
The shot clock.
Yeah, the shot clock.
Super Tuesday, the short-lived Super Tuesday.
Yeah, short-lived Super Tuesday game that Germantown got Appleton East got maybe a few extra seconds or an extra second to take that extra to get that winning shot off. And then I'm going to date myself by going back to the 90s. But for you North Shore followers out there, you remember Whitefish Bay had a great high school team in the late 90s. Went to state 3 times, won state in 96. Got back in 97 and then won in 98, I believe. And that 97 team was the favorite to win it. And they were in a tight game with Sauk Prairie. There was I call it a phantom charge call on one of the Whitefish Bay players that late in the game really turned things, and Sauk Prairie got some free throws, and it led to Bay losing the game. So that was I guess that was my first thought when I thought about a call really changing or really affecting the final outcome of a game. So, but hopefully this week on the high school, at the high school level, everything will be controversy free and the right teams win. We'll talk about it next week. For more Preps Plus action, you can join me and Lance Allen every Sunday night on today's TMJ4. Till next time, take care.